What's up and welcome to Albino Rhino Music, and today we take the Beatles' classic album Let It Be and put it up head to head against their other album, Let It Be Naked.
I like riding my bike at night because I get burned in the broad daylight. I'm just a blind albino trying to get home.
So typically how this album versus album going head to head against each other works is I take a classic album from a band and put it up against another one of their albums that might be considered a classic or was huge for them. And I go track by track through the album, and track one goes up against track one, I pick a winner. Track two goes up against track two, I pick a winner. And the album that has the most winners of tracks at the end of it is the champion. We'll have one of Weezer's Blue Album versus Weezer's White Album. We'll have one of Green Day's Dookie versus Green Day American Idiot. So this one is a little unique because essentially it's the same album that's put up against each other. Let It Be versus Let It Be Naked. If you tuned into our tier list of the Beatles, sorry it was a little lengthy, good discussion though, but if you turned into the tier list of the Beatles and stuck around to the end where we talked about Let It Be and Let It Be Naked, then you would have heard most of us talk about how we definitely prefer Let It Be Naked over Let It Be. And we talked a lot about different reasons why. I've talked about it on the channel and will continue to talk about how the structuring of songs, like the order of songs on an album, can totally change an album. Not only can it make an album better if the songs are rearranged and placed differently, it can also make songs that follow up other songs just like lift them and enhance them and make them better as well. But also the production. And so we talked about how on Let It Be Naked, Phil Spector's famous wall of sound was put on this. Now, to be fair to Phil Spector, he did, I think, with the Beatles what he thought the Beatles wanted to do. They were going back into the studio and they were gonna have more of a live recording where they're writing together and just recording and jamming and stuff like that, and there's back to basic kind of thing. And so I think his wall of sound kind of gives that that's what I've heard. It gives this raw live sound. But to me, before I went track by track and did track one versus track one, I went and listened to the first song on Let It Be, which is The Two of Us. And then I listened to The Two of Us on Let It Be Naked. Then I went back to Let It Be and I listened to Dig a Pony. And then I went to Let It Be Naked and listened to Dig a Pony. And I did that for every song. And it's crazy how different it sounds. I mean, again, not to talk trash on Phil Spector's sound, it was on some of the most iconic albums of all time, including Let It Be, but also the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. So not I know better or anything, but I think that a lot of Beatles fans kind of agree with us on Let It Be Naked, specifically because Ringo and Paul were kind of at the forefront of this and in charge of this, and so they oversaw what was going on with it. It's not like it was some outsider that did this with Let It Be. But anyways, when I listened to each song on each album back to back from each other, Let It Be almost sounds comparatively, and you can hear it more dramatically on certain songs, but Let It Be sounds almost like it's underwater, or you have a speaker with a big pillow over it. And it just sounds muffled and not as crisp. When you put Let It Be Naked on, it's crisp and clear and doesn't feel so muffledy, and you can hear things you never heard before. And I know it was early 2000s, so you could say, well, production was better, but I don't think it was just that. I really believe taking that wall of sound away, all of a sudden instruments become more clear and they don't get hidden in the noise. And you can hear acoustic guitars that you never really heard that stuck out before, that weren't the forefront of the guitars, or you hear a piano part or harmonies more. Everything is just so much more crisp. So with that said, while obviously we talked about liking Let It Be Naked more, I just raved about how the production of it, and I think the song order makes it better. But I wanted to do this Let It Be versus Let It Be Naked so we could go song by song and see if, again, this is subjective, but see if the song order change really makes it a better album. So here we go. Track 1 versus track 1. So on Let It Be, we have The Two of Us. And on Let It Be Naked, we have Get Back. So The Two of Us is a fantastic song. I love this song. Little folksy, awesome song. In fact, like I said, the songs being rearranged, I grew to appreciate this song more when Let It Be Naked came out. I remember getting Let It Be Naked, and all of a sudden I liked Let It Be more than I ever had. The Two of Us, it was almost like, even though it starts the album on Let It Be, when I listen to Let It Be Naked, and it has I've Got a Feeling following it up, man, it lifts both of those songs so high. And it was almost like I'd never heard The Two of Us, even though it's the first song on Let It Be. Anyways, putting Get Back at number 1. It doesn't matter where you place Get Back. This is a fantastic all-time Beatles song. So while I love The Two of Us, not only is this a fantastic all-time Beatles song, even on the Let It Be recording, on Let It Be Naked, it's just so much more crisp and punchy, and it's awesome. And it should have started this album, not ended it like it did on the original Let It Be. Putting it at the beginning sets a different tone than The Two of Us. Again, while I love The Two of Us, putting Get Back at the beginning sets a different tone. And when you have these two paired up against each other, I'm sorry, while I love The Two of Us, Get Back is just a banger of a song. Again, one of my top 5 favorite Beatles songs, and it definitely destroys The Two of Us. So that puts Let It Be Naked up 1-0. So the next song, interestingly enough, is the same song. This is the one placement that they didn't change, Dig a Pony. They put it as number 2 on Let It Be Naked, and it was number 2 on Let It Be. However, I think following Get Back enhances this song. I always liked Dig a Pony. I really did. But man, putting it after Get Back enhances this song so much. It makes it so much stronger of a song. It keeps the album going and the feel of it. And not only that, again, keeping this short, I have to pick the Let It Be Naked version of Dig a Pony. The sound is so much more crisp and clear, and the guitars pop so much more. 100% Dig a Pony off Let It Be Naked takes the victory on this one. So they're up 2-0. The next track we have, track number 3, we have Across the Universe going up against For You Blue. Now, two things. One, For You Blue, definitely not one of my favorite songs. It's more one of the lackluster songs on this album. It's not terrible. It's fine. I don't necessarily skip it if I put the whole album on. I definitely think it's enhanced here. You have these two, you have Get Back and then Dig a Pony, and they're kind of bangers, they rock. And then so it's okay to go into this For You Blue. Across the Universe, I understand it a little bit. I understand it more since Let It Be Naked came out. Always thought it was kind of an odd song. Never one of my favorites. I get the melodies are great and stuff, but at the same time, it sounded even more like it was underwater. Like they were trying to put this trippy sound on it, like a Magical Mystery Tour or Sgt. Pepper's kind of trippy effect over his vocals. And I thought that was odd. I didn't think it necessarily fit the album and what the album was doing. And so for that reason, I've never really dug Across the Universe. And honestly, because it's one of, I don't love this version of the song on the regular Let It Be. That For You Blue, even though it's not one of my favorite Beatles songs, it's done much better on Let It Be Naked. The guitars sound so much better. I definitely am picking For You Blue, bringing Let It Be Naked up 3-0. All right, so the next one, we have I Me Mine on Let It Be, and it's going up against The Long and Winding Road. Now, if you heard our Beatles tier list, one of my friends on it, Michael Sanders, he was appalled that I do not like The Long and Winding Road. And my buddy Matt, that was on the tier list with us, does not like this song either. It's one of the Beatles songs I do not like. I never have. I can understand. I hear all the orchestral stuff happening on the Let It Be version too. It's more orchestral based instead of acoustic-y piano based. And I hear what people like about it if you like that sound, but that is not what I go to the Beatles for, and it just kind of drags on to me. I've never liked it, even on the Let It Be Naked version. While it's more clear and crisp, I don't know that it does it better being more acoustic-y piano instead of the orchestral stuff. With that said, I love I Me Mine, and I loved it on Let It Be. It's even better on Let It Be Naked, but I still loved it on Let It Be. So with that one, Let It Be is going to take the first victory. See, I'm trying to be partial. I'm trying not to just go with Let It Be Naked because I like the album better. I Me Mine takes the victory over The Long and Winding Road, although some people might hate that I said that. All right, so now here's something I did do. Let It Be has one more song than Let It Be Naked. Because it had 12 songs, Let It Be Naked has 11 songs. They cut out 2 songs, and I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the video. They cut out Dig It and Maggie May. And they added another song that I'll talk about when we get to the end of this video, towards the end. But they cut out Maggie May and Dig It, and they added a song. And so I wanted to just cut one of those out, since both of them, in my opinion, are barely songs. So I cut out Dig It. I just chose one, so it would be a fair 11 songs versus 11 songs. So Dig It would have come in at number 5 on Let It Be. So everything is essentially getting pushed up a track on Let It Be, which means track 6 would have been Let It Be on Let It Be, but now it's track number 5. So Let It Be is going head to head versus the 2 of us. Man, like I said, I love the 2 of us, and I absolutely love that folksy, acousticy, but it's got a gallop to it, and it's not just slow, and it's such a good song. Lyrically is such an awesome song, and this album, Let It Be Naked, made me appreciate this song so much more. The placement of it, where it is on the album, I think it enhances it, increases it. After you go through The Long and Winding Road, it kind of picks you back up in this folksy way, and then goes into a banger of a song afterwards. But it's going up against Let It Be. And I like the original Let It Be version. Now, I do like Let It Be on Let It Be Naked, but I love the original Let It Be. It's a fantastic song. And because of what's going to happen on track 11 at the end of this, I had to pick Let It Be here. It kind of breaks my heart a little bit because I love 2 of Us so much that I have not picked it on either album. But it's not 2 of Us's fault that it's going up against Let It Be, an iconic Beatles song that everybody knows, that is just a fantastic feel-good ballady of a song. All right, so that takes us to track 6, where we're going Maggie May versus I've Got a Feeling. This is almost unfair. I mean, it is unfair because we have Maggie May, which again is barely a song. And I said earlier, Let It Be, it's a weird placement of it. Originally, Let It Be ended side A, and so it made you want to turn over. And then it starts with Maggie May. I thought that's a weird thing to start with, but whatever. You got Maggie May. It's not like trash, but it's nothing special to me. I don't really care. Whatever. I've Got a Feeling is so awesome. I love how John and Paul are both singing in this. I love when they both start singing and Paul's like, I've got a feeling. And then John's singing the other parts. And God, it's so good. This is such a good song. It's one of my favorites, one of the best on this album. I mean, it just annihilates Maggie May. Sorry, Maggie May fans. I've Got a Feeling annihilates you. So that gives another point to Let It Be Naked, which brings Let It Be Naked 4, and Let It Be has 2. That takes us to track number 7, and we have I've Got a Feeling on Let It Be, the original, and then we have One After 909 on Let It Be Naked. Now, One After 909 is a fun little song, taking them back to their roots almost. I still like it. You know, it's strange because I used to always think One After 909, before I really started placing songs on albums, like it felt like an old Beatles song. I always thought it was one of their olders, like on Help or Hard Day's Night or something like that. And then I was like, oh, it's almost like they wanted to do something that was more like what they did when they first started, when they wrote this. It's a very good song. Fun song, fast little song, short. But I've Got a Feeling is, again, even on Let It Be, so much better. It kills the song One After 909. Now, not like I've Got a Feeling killed Maggie May. That's much closer, but it's still 2 wins in a row now for I've Got a Feeling. And so that gives Let It Be 3 points, and we have Let It Be Naked with 4 points. All right, next we have track 8, which we have on Let It Be One After 909 versus Let It Be Naked's Don't Let Me Down. Now, this was the song I was talking about that they added. And honestly, it is just appalling that Maggie May and Dig It were chosen over Don't Let Me Down. In fact, for that matter, besides maybe Get Back and I've Got a Feeling, Don't Let Me Down, and I think Don't Let Me Down's better than I've Got a Feeling. Don't Let Me Down is such a good song. And the fact that it wasn't included on this album, and it fits so well with the rest of the vibe, aesthetic, sound, tone of this album. It fits so well on here. It blows my mind that Don't Let Me Down, that Phil Spector and them did not include this on the original Let It Be. It blows my mind. And this enhances this album so much. It makes it so much better. You could have taken both Dig It and Maggie May on and put this on, and it could have been a 10-song album, and it would have been epic. Like, this song alone lifts this album, but restructuring the whole thing does too. With that said, I mean, we had I've Got a Feeling just beat One After 909, and if you remember me saying that, and I'm just now saying that Don't Let Me Down's even better than that song. I mean, this is an amazing song. Great love song, a great song to put on mixes, just a fantastic rockin'. It's almost got this like bluesy, soulful vibe to it too. It is so good. And Don't Let Me Down kills One After 909. On this one. So that gives Let It Be Naked up another point, and it brings it up 5-3. Next, we have I, Me, Mine on Let It Be Naked versus The Long and Winding Road on Let It Be. Strangely enough, because of how I had to take off Dig It on Let It Be to make the tracks even, and it pushed every song up 1 slot, it made The Long and Winding Road and I, Me, Mine battle each other for a second time now. And again, I'm not going to just go over everything I said before, but how I feel about The Long and Winding Road, it's even more that way on this. I don't know. Like I said, I like the orchestral part stuff maybe a little bit on The Long and Winding Road more. I don't know. But either way, I Be Mine rocks, and it beats this one. It's a good song. It's such a feel-good song, and it sounds so much better on Let It Be Naked. The guitar, the acoustic guitars pop so much more. All right, so that gives Let It Be Naked 6 points to Let It Be's 3. So after that, we have For You Blue on Let It Be versus Across the Universe on Let It Be Naked. Now, I kind of talked about this earlier, and this is the second time these two face off against each other. It was For You Blue and Across the Universe earlier. However, this time, I'm going to flip who won. So if you remember For You Blue won earlier, Across the Universe is going to win for me this time. For You Blue's never been one of my favorites, and I think I understood Across the Universe even more. I think the singing, the melodies, is so much better on Let It Be Naked. The song is so much better. I kind of get it more with just the acoustic guitar and not the washed out, trippy sounding version that's on Let It Be that I felt like didn't quite fit, and it fit more on like an older album. But man, I know Across the Universe was like kind of like a popular song, not one of their tops, but it was definitely Beatle fans liked it before. I never understood it until this, and I dig it. Every time it comes on, Let It Be Naked, I love listening to this song. So Across the Universe definitely takes the win on this one. Giving Let It Be Naked 7 points and giving Let It Be 3 points. Lastly, we have Get Back on Let It Be versus Let It Be on Let It Be Naked. Now, the placement of these two songs, the placement of Get Back to end the album, I think is silly. To have this song that comes in with this rolling bass, which is awesome, so good, and then it picks you up, and then the album's over. Like, that's a perfect opener song. I'd never understood why that never was. That's something that makes Let It Be Naked so special. And Let It Be, again, like I said, should end the album. It always should have. And it's a perfect ender to this album, to the title track. With that said, even though I like the Let It Be Naked version a little bit more than the Let It Be version of Let It Be, I've just said Let It Be like 1,200 times, it feels like. Get Back is still a banger. It was awesome on Let It Be. I may not like the placement on the original album, but I love the song Get Back. And I know Let It Be is like a staple for Beatles fans, a lot of people's favorite Beatles songs. That's why I picked it earlier over Two of Us, because I knew I was going to pick Get Back here. I think Get Back is a huge staple song that people know too, so I don't think too many people will be appalled that I'm choosing Get Back over Let It Be. But Get Back, man, even on the older version, it still rocked. I'm choosing it over Let It Be. And that gives Let It Be 4 points. Let It Be Naked definitely destroyed it with 7 points. Thanks for joining us on Albino Rhino Music, and we will see you next time. Most of my album versus album things like this will come a little bit closer than this. And I really did. I tried to be fair. I tried to give Let It Be more wins if I could, and not just give it to it. I legitimately favored those songs on Let It Be that I picked. But anyway, let me know if you disagree with me. If you think Let It Be is better than Let It Be Naked, and if you don't like either one of them, if you think Let It Be Naked ruined it, if you would do things differently or you would pick different winners, let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe. Check out our other videos. Check out our Beatles tier list. Check out our game show where we guess Beatles, Queen, and Muse songs. Thanks for joining us on Albino Rhino Music, and we will see you next time.
I like when my mind